buying on your terms is to design their lifestyle, first of all, and then to do so without the interference, I'll call it, of banks and having to sign personally. So that means three things. It means owner financing, it means lease purchase, and it means subject to existing financing. Because all of those mean I'm not taking out a loan, I'm not signing personally. And coming out of the '08 crash, I couldn't. I had no credit, I had no money. So I had to design ways that worked for me, and that's what it was.
Welcome to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owners Association, where real estate investors have found success since 1968. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group. This episode is sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com. Get ready for the Midwest Real Estate Investor Conference in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Join hundreds of real estate investors for networking, learning, and growth. Be sure to mark your calendars for April 24th and 25th of 2025. Hello and welcome to episode 469. Chris Prefontaine has figured out a way to navigate all kinds of real estate investing challenges by buying on his terms. He's engineered his entire business to weather all storms and economic cycles, and he helps his students do the same as the chairman and founder of Smart Real Estate Coach. Today, he's going to explain what it means to buy and sell real estate on terms and whether now is a good time to be investing in the market. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me. Quite the accomplishment to go 400 and some odd episodes. So congrats on that.
You know, I always remember our conversation about buying on terms because I think the creativity that you brought to that, just that concept, really made for a great podcast episode. So not remembering what we talked about then, let's just do it again, because I think it's always good to have that conversation, sometimes multiple times, because the information you're sharing is gold.
I appreciate that. And if it was that long ago, Brian, right, it's different now. So it's worth revisiting anyway.
Tell us, let's talk about that term, buying on your terms. What does that really mean?
It's the title of our book, which will give everybody a chance to get later. But what I meant by that is creative real estate. But what I meant by that when I kind of twisted creative real estate and said buying on your terms is to design their lifestyle, first of all, and then to do so without the interference, I'll call it, of banks and having to sign personally. So that means three things. It means owner financing, it means lease purchase, and it means subject to existing financing. Because all of those mean I'm not taking out a loan, I'm not signing personally. And coming out of the '08 crash, I couldn't. I had no credit, I had no money. So I had to design ways that worked for me, and that's what it was.
Do you mind if we just take that step by step? The three things that you just outlined. The first one is owner financing. Let's talk about that, and what does that look like, and give us an example.
Owner financing has been around since before banking, just for context, in case people are new listening. And we take it to the next level, and we niche it down, Brian, to free and clear property, actually. Because owner financing can mean a whole bunch of things. That could be a whole hour, but we go free and clear properties, which is about a third of the properties in the United States, generally speaking. And when we buy those from the owner becomes the bank if you do it owner financing. So instead of you taking out a loan and paying the bank, you're simply coming up with a price and you're paying monthly payments to the owner. And when we do it with free and clear properties, literally 99% of the deals, we're doing it principal-only payments. So just think about how powerful that is. You've got an environment now with rates, I don't even know what they are now, 6 or 7%. Okay, 0%. And that hammers down your principal every single month. So the longer we go on a term with owner financing, the stronger return it is for us. So that's, in a nutshell, that's how we buy owner financing.
How do you convince a seller to actually do owner financing? And give us a real example of a conversation that you've had recently with the seller.
I only chuckle because it is by far the biggest question we get. Like, come on, how do you convince? Well, I'll tell you how we speak to them, and I'll also talk about a real deal. And I'll then kind of give you a formula for how lucrative they can be. So we had one recently. I'll go residential, right? Because this can be done with any asset class, just to be clear there. I bought my office building this way. But this was a house that it was a second home for someone who lives in Midwest. The house was in Connecticut, New England area. He had twin sons and a daughter. Sadly, he lost one of his sons while at this house. So he emotionally wanted nothing to do with it. They put it on the market. Fall was coming up. This was last fall. And of course, around here, fall is approaching winter. They're from the Midwest. They don't want to come back here. They don't want to have to maintain it. So we got that from an expired listing. So it didn't sell. And here we are. We're in the winter. And we said, look, we'll give you your price. If you can wait for your cash, we can do it over time. So think about that. That was a short conversation with them. They wanted closure. Remember, we're not convincing. We're solving problems, right? Or helping people accomplish a goal that the market didn't. In his case, he was on for like 400 grand. We tied it up for 400 grand. But if he had sold with an agent, do the math. Say he got 97% of ask, and then he had to pay a commission significantly lower. We said, we'll give you the 4. We'll pay you $1,000 a month, principal only, for 4 years. He took it. We're into this thing now, a good strong year. So we've got some serious principal pay down. But that was why he and his wife did it. They wanted to fly back and be done with this house. And usually that's the case, Brian. Like, I have a problem, or I have an extra mortgage I don't want anymore, or an extra maintenance, I should say, if they're free and clear, and I just want closure. And key point, I don't need the money today. I'd rather have my best price over time.
There's two terms there that sellers often get hung up on. One is price, and the other is interest rate. You're able to give them the price they want, but is that kind of a trade-off for them taking a zero interest rate? I mean, that's a tough hill to climb, to convince a seller, hey, we're not going to pay you, we're going to pay you zero interest rate. How do you navigate that? When
you solve the issue, in that case, I want closure, my son passed away. When you solve an issue, I will tell you that most of the time it doesn't come up. So I tell them, if it did come up, say you were the seller, I say, look, Brian, we have kind of a seesaw here of 3 variables, and there can be 4. I'm just going to go with what you said if you were the seller. We have interest rate that you just brought up. We have price, and we have term. So which one is most important? And if he said price, which he did, I say, great, I can't give you all 3. That wouldn't be fair. So that word fair is kind of like, okay, it's 50-50 here. We got to be fair. So we got him to his price, and interest didn't come up with him. But if it did, that's how I would have handled it. If interest didn't come up, but down payment came up, I would say, look, Brian, we have down payment, we have price, and we have term, which is most important, and try to nail that and accomplish that. And when you do, and they're truly motivated, the other variables don't come up.
And do you have a formula that you use in your training with your students as to, like, okay, what are the terms that we should be shooting for, and what are the trade-offs we'll make in order to get this particular term?
I tell them at least 4 years, because if you're taking ownership, unlike a lease purchase that we may get to today, the onus is on you. You own the house, and you promised to have a balloon payment in 4 years. Well, you've got to have your ducks in a row, and you got to have your buyer cashing you out so that all that can happen. So I like 4 years. In an uncertain market like we've been in since COVID till now, frankly, I think, and I think it can continue, I like even longer, 5, 7, 10. My building, I did 20 years. Because if I have 10 years, let's say, or 5 years of principal pay down, do I really care what the market does in between? I really don't. Because in that case, we pay down $1,000 a month for this will be 4 years. It's $48,000 without calculating anything else. So 4 years is what I like to do. Now, as far as twisting up the metrics, if he had said to me, okay, Chris, I'll take 1,000 and I'll take 4 years, but I want 405, let's just say a premium. That's 5,000 extra. That's only 5 months of payments. I'll go as high as 6 months per extra year of term, right? So in 5 months, I ate up that premium. I don't care if I have a 4 or 5 or 7 year term. So that's what I give him. I said, look, don't give away more than like 1 to 6 months on top of a premium of your monthly payment.
Buying on your terms, there's 3 things that you look at, and you just described one. What are the other 2, and can you go into a little bit more detail on the second?
The second one is subject to existing financing. The reason I bring that up second is this one is unlike the 0% interest. This one can get you very, very, very low interest. Why? Because you and I and everyone else saw 2, 3, and 4% interest rates not too long ago, right? So we're buying these properties with people that might be more, unlike the free and clear owner, might be a little more stressed out. They want financial relief. So they have mortgages or an extra house with a mortgage on it with rates of 2, 3, 4%, 5%. We're buying that property. The mortgage is staying in their name, but we're transferring the property to a trust. We won't get into the whole legal side of it, but we're transferring that property to a trust. And we're going to pick up whatever interest rate's in place, and we're not assuming it. So we're not signing personally. But subject to, or sub to, as you'll see on the internet, means that loan stays in place and we're buying the property. Those are phenomenal right now because you can literally search for 2 to 4% interest rates or 2 to 5. and seek those out in your efforts to secure property. Even if you did it for your own house, right? You get an interest rate that you can't get elsewhere.
How would you search for what people's interest rates are?
The databases now are crazy. You can search for, people that wear pink socks on Wednesdays. I'm being facetious, but our data in the United States, unlike Canada, is very easy to get to. You can also search for people that are pre-notice of default and find out in there, okay, what are the interest rates? Because you might run into those on accident, but you can also seek them out through the databases.
Talk us through that conversation and that subject to conversation, because I'd imagine that is even more confusing sometimes to sellers.
I'll give you a real one. It's sitting on my desk. Her first name is Kayla, just so I have a reference. I literally have all the notes here, as you can see. So this woman came to us because twice she's been on the market. Then she had a divorce. Now she already has secured another home, and her mortgage broker told her, you can keep the loan in your name because that's how I'm proposing we buy it, but you can't fall behind because I can't qualify you for another loan if you slip on a payment here. So this woman calls us and says, look, I'm barely making this payment. I have another place to go. I'm single now. I can't hang on more than another month or two. So this is a whole different conversation. Can you help? Yes, we can help, and here's how. We would buy it, you'd stay in your name, we'd keep the payments up, so you solved your problem of keeping the payments up, and at some date in the future, we would cash it out. The person that needs that financial relief, that's the end of the conversation. This is a current, like we're going back and forth because she wanted to try it one more week with a relative, which I know won't happen. So then she's going to call back and we're going to structure that purchase agreement.
So she's unable to sell, which puts her in a really tough position because she can't keep up on the mortgage payments. So she would sell to you subject to, you would take over the payments. Are you paying her extra? I mean, how do you work the other terms in that so that she's happy?
In her case, now this does lead into some other advanced stuff. Like there are many homes lately that our students are grabbing that have the sub-2 component, but they also have equity. So we have a second mortgage that'll be owner financing type stuff. In her case, it's just what she owes on it. By the time she sells with an agent and gets the mortgage paid off and pays all her fees, she might even have to come out of pocket. So hers is just we're buying for exactly what's owed on the mortgage, and that's it. She just gets the relief. She doesn't get any money.
And you mentioned putting it into a trust, like you would have her put it into a trust. What does that accomplish?
Well, without going too deep, and just for your listeners, I'm definitely not an attorney or a CPA, but of late, we've been doing it differently. So we used to put it in a trust, and the trust name would be, if it was you, would be the 123 Jump Street, whatever the address is, Hamrick Family Trust. And the reason we did that, and then we got a little bit more advanced recently, the reason we did that route for our attorneys was the Garment St. Germain Act allowed you, back in like the 80s, allowed you to transfer property without a due on sale clause happening. And that kind of masks it a little bit in my terms, non-legal terms. So we were doing that. And then of late, our attorneys got a little bit more advanced, and they now put it in a trust with the owner still having some beneficial interest, so that if we ever went out of business or whatever, we've been in 33 years, but if someone's new doing this, they can talk to the sellers comfortably, or their attorney can, that the sellers are not going to lose control of this property. They're going to be part of the trust, and we can just change beneficial interest. So keeping it basic, that's why we kind of keep tweaking how we do this.
What has been your experience with the banks? Have they, do they not know about this because you're putting it into a trust, or have you had any banks say, hey, wait a minute, this looks like a sale or a transfer to us?
We have not, and I've been at this 33 years this last month, but I'm not saying it's never going to happen to someone, but if it does happen and you're going the trust route, you can change beneficial interest. You can do all kinds of things so that you can protect yourself and the seller. What do the banks really want? They want to get paid. If you don't do what you say you're going to do and you're late on payments, is that going to cause a red flag? Sure. But if you pay, my experience has been, if we pay the payments, we haven't had a hassle in all those years.
The first one was kind of buying on your terms, and then buying subject to. What was the third one?
Third one, is lease purchase. And lease purchase tends to be, there's less benefits because you're not owning it, right? Accounting wise and depreciation wise. But for the new person, it tends to be a little bit more palatable, because our lease purchase agreements are built in with a $10 deposit. Transfer of title does not happen. So there's a little bit less risk, you could say. And it's a little bit easier for a new person to start quickly with those. Again, $10 to tie up a property and create 3 paydays. Our paydays are worth, this is definitely an update since I was on your show. Our paydays are worth anywhere in the community from like a low of 45 grand to a high new record in 24 was 350 grand, all 3 paydays in one deal. So it's important that you put that in context for how lucrative these can be.
Talk about that. Like, what do you mean by paydays and where do they come in?
Paydays are this. We do not put a buyer in the home. We do rent to own on our exits, most of them. Again, to keep this conversation simple, we do not put a buyer in a home unless they're a true qualified buyer that had a either timing issue, like they started their own business and a bank needs to see 2 years of track record, what they call seasoning, or they had a legitimate life event in a credit ding that's legitimate. We can track it. It's not a 40-year history of bad credit, and they need time. So it's just time. When we put them in the home, they have a down payment because they're a true buyer. They just can't get financing yet. That's payday one. Payday two is the delta, the spread between the underlying debt that we're paying, whether it's to a bank or to the seller, and what the rent-to-own client is paying us. Is a small delta there, $300 to $1,000, call it, per month per house. And then the third payday is interesting because that's the markup on the home and all of the principal pay down that accrues during the deal. That's where it gets very interesting. So I'll give that formula that I keep saying I'm going to give. In the 3 payday formula, when you have a free and clear property, this is super, super lucrative because if you get a term of 4 years, which we said was normal when you asked me that, and you buy a house for at least 200 grand or higher, and most markets have that size home, and it's free and clear, and you structure at least a $950 monthly principal payment, our 3 paydays will be a 6-figure deal every time. Now, am I saying you're going to go out and find 5 of these a month? No, but you can find a half dozen a year, and that's a game changer for most people using those numbers.
I'd like to take a moment to tell you about Green Property Management. Not only do they manage everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area, they also manage my entire portfolio. So I can tell you from personal experience that their unique flat fee management style is worth a closer look. If you feel that your property isn't operating to its fullest potential, then Green Property Management can help you take a holistic approach that will save you money, eliminate your headaches, and increase your net income. And if you're a property manager interested in applying Green Property Management's model, give them a call at 1-866-95-GREEN or visit them on the web at greenpropertymgt.com. If you're thinking of leaving your W-2 job and becoming a full-time real estate investor, one of the greatest costs you must consider is healthcare for you and your family. When I made this transition myself, I found the whole healthcare insurance process to be confusing and frustrating. That's why I'm glad I met Chad Creasy at RCB and Associates. Chad is a professional health insurance agent who helps real estate investors and small business owners understand and choose their best healthcare options. And best of all, his services are covered by the insurance company and won't cost you a dime. If you live in Michigan and are expecting a change in your healthcare insurance coverage for any reason, or losing employer coverage or transitioning into Medicare, then you owe it to yourself to contact Chad Creasy at rcbassociatesllc.com. Save the date for the Midwest Real Estate Investor Conference happening April 24th and 25th of 2025 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. This event is the perfect place to connect with fellow real estate investors, gain valuable insights, and elevate your real estate game. With a lineup of expert speakers and numerous networking opportunities, you won't want to miss it. Backing up to the beginning, these strategies, buying on terms, subject to, and possibly buying through, lease to own, this is so that your students or you can take control of the property, but then sell it to another buyer who wants to own the property eventually. Is that really the end goal, is to find not a tenant that you're going to rent to, but to find a buyer who's going to be paying you? And how do you structure that with the buyer? Is it another lease to own situation?
Yeah, it's a rent to own, and you said it right. They have to be true buyers that just need time. That's the factor they need. We give them the time they need. Now, how do we structure that, and how do we not tie ourselves up at the beginning? Each one of those methods I described, our contracts are pre-written with a contingency to find the buyer. So you're not taking on this debt. Now, are there decisions you'll come across where you can make a lot more, perhaps on a house with someone that needs bailing out right away and you don't have your buyer yet? Sure. But those are decisions you'll make, business decisions. The contracts are written to protect you. If you want it in there, it's contingent upon the buyer. And then once we do that, if I have a 4-year term, for example, I'm going to structure a rent-to-own contract for 24 months or 30 months. So I have a ton of wiggle room time if they default or they need more time. That happens. People have stuff. One of the criteria is you have to be mortgage ready by this date, and the mortgage ready plan comes from a third party. One of those would be you can't run up your credit cards. Well, if somebody runs up a credit card, they're going to need another 6 months, right, to fix that. So things like that. We leave wiggle room in our term, so we're not under the gun when we're supposed to cash out the seller.
You're dealing with buyers and sellers, but let's talk about buyers here. They can be very unpredictable and sometimes not follow through the way you would expect them to. How often do you have problems with your buyers who fall out versus them actually following through and being able to get a loan eventually?
I can tell you, because we're approaching somewhere in the 1,000 homes range in our community. It's like 2 to 10% default rate. And I'll tell you that, and you can find this publicly on podcasts especially, there are mentors that teach rent to own, and they'll say this publicly, which kills me, that have about a 20% success rate. Why is that? Well, they don't have anything on the front end qualifying their buyers like we do, because frankly, they don't care. Because the buyer defaults, they either become a renter or they leave, and then the investor gets to collect another deposit and do it again. And it might be legal for them, Brian, but it's morally and ethically, it's just not our world. All our transactions, one of our values is all transactions with the highest integrity. Well, I want a buyer to come in, know that they have a plan, and then get them to the finish line, not just guessing that we might get there, we might not, and knowing that they probably won't. So we're very strict with that. My son, Nick, has designed that since, 2014, he started with me. So 10 years of sort of tweaking the buyer process to make sure we're getting a true buyer and being very picky. Because you can stick anyone in the house, to your point. You can stick a renter that says, yeah, I want to buy it someday. The second piece of this is we're going to collect enough down payment so they have that skin in the game. They're a true buyer. They behave like buyers. They capture appreciation like buyers. If the market goes up or down, and they fix the house up, they can improve it. It's their house. They just don't have a loan yet.
How do you set up that pipeline to find these buyers who actually qualify? Because I mean, from my perspective, that seems like a crapshoot, but you must have a very refined system to make that happen.
We do, especially over the years, because we've been stung, right? Back in like 2014 and 15, when I first asked Nick, my son, for his help, I was putting people there not understanding what the ramifications were. So how we do it is simple. The biggest challenge is you've got, I'll use a round number, 80% of the buyers today, and if you took a snapshot today, can't get qualified, especially the new rates. So that's a big pool of buyers. Now, does that mean they're all good rent-to-own? No. So the challenge becomes having the systems, the pre-done videos, which we have, that brings a phone call that might just be a renter through the process to weed them out. And then let the kind of 20% raise to the top. Because that's a large, you talk to any mortgage broker right now that does a lot of volume, they'll tell you 17 to 20 apps out of 100 are getting approved. That's low.
So it really is the 80-20 rule. 80% isn't going to work, but 20% is what rises to the top.
That's who we talked to. So that's the hardest part. We had a boot camp here last week with like just 15 students. We do small ones. And one of the students said, oh yeah, my first house had 450 inquiries. So the challenge is weeding through that and having that system, not getting them, because it's such a broad category.
And then there must be a certain amount of hand-holding through the process once you put the buyer in the house, to make sure. You talk about watching their credit scores and their credit card, making sure they're not running that up. Do you have a process for that as well?
So we have a bunch of checklists in place. One of them is, certainly if there's anything late by even a day or two, it's a flag, and we want to get out to the house to see what's going on, right? Because that's something's going on. You're not late on a mortgage unless you get a problem. We treat this like a mortgage. So that's in place. Second is there's a rider on their lease purchase, their rent-own agreement, that comes from a third party. It's my credit team, they call themselves. They're in PA, Pennsylvania. Been doing all our buyers for 11 years. And they have a rider that necessitates the buyer being in credit repair, if it's them, by the way, because the people that need time don't need that. They have good credit. But if they need credit repair, there's a rider that says they have to stay on that program and stay in the mortgage ready program until they purchase or they default their option. So there's strict guidelines that says, here's where you have to go. There's DTI statements they have to sign, debt to income. All these are part of their mortgage plan. So it's a rather serious conversation at the beginning of the process when they're accepted. Is
there anything else with your buying on terms system that we should touch on, or you want to make sure you mention?
I would just tell you, general listeners, right? Doesn't matter what you're in for asset class. The constant in real estate is it's going to constantly change, right? I don't care if it's COVID or this or that. It's changing. There's election, things are different, right? Okay. If that's the case, why not get really good at your skill set wise at buying on terms, so that when the market does pivot, you don't care. In fact, you're excited, because every time it pivots, sellers need help and they need a guide, and you're it. And you can be comfortable with not going, oh, I got to wait for this to happen, or I got to wait for the election, or I got to wait for COVID. No, you can dive into the market every single week if you know how to pivot. So just general comment on that.
What is the market to you right now? And is it a good time to buy and do this process? As we speak right now, it's election day. So I was going to say, should we wait till after the election? But this is coming out right before Christmas. So should we wait till 2025? I mean, is there a better time to begin this process?
Billionaires don't know where the market's going, nor do I. But here's my comments generally to your question. One is, when the general public, by the masses, when the media is screaming whatever direction they're screaming, when the general public's going in one direction, I typically take that as a sign as I'm going the other way. But generally speaking, in creative real estate, when there's uncertainty or chaos or the market's making a shift, absolute best time is to be in creative real estate. Right this very second, as of the time we're filming, rents are very high, as you know. Rents are as high as they are not even caught up to interest rates. Meaning, if you're a buyer of mine and you go to get a mortgage on the home I'm showing you, my rent's probably going to be a little cheaper. And I have to disclose that your mortgage is probably going to bump. So now's a great time to get top dollar on your monthly rents in the rent-to-own world too. Now, who knows by 25 what the rates are doing. So it's always a good time. I can justify it when the rates are really low because I can buy better. You can go on and on with the differences. The fact is when it's not a dead, boring, stable market, it's even better for us in creative.
Tell our listeners how they can find out more about you, get a hold of you, learn about your coaching, and definitely talk about your book a little bit too.
We have a bunch of free stuff just because I want people to, there's other people in the industry, right? So I'm not so naive to think it's just us. So I want you to be able to look at things for free. So a couple of resources, you can go to wickedsmartbooks.com/Brian Hamrick. We're going to give everybody as on this show listeners a free copy of the hard copy book, like we sent you, Brian. So it's not one of those offers where it says free and you go and you got to put in shipping. It's free. Okay. And you get some goodies in there too. Secondly, I did a workshop. It's free and you can listen to it if you don't mind dealing with me for 55 more minutes. And you just go to smartrealestatecoach.com/masters class, masters with an S, masters class. And you can watch it that way at your own leisure. Nobody's bugging you. You look at it. If it's something you want to pursue further, you'll have contact information in both those resources.
What is your favorite hack or app?
Right this second, I'll say, because it's in front of me, it's not a hack. It's just an app, and it's the Experian app. I'll give them a plug. I'm obsessed with credit since my credit was trashed after the crash of 2008, right? And I don't use it now, so I'm obsessed with it. And the Experian app is really cool. I'm on it all the time. They've expanded it so much.
Other than your credit score, what kind of information do you get from it?
They connect you with quotes for things like insurance, homeowners, because they'll look at your makeup. They'll connect you with lenders if you want to do that, or credit cards that are more advantageous. So they become pretty robust, to name just a few. You can lock things from there. It's just a push a button. Simple.
Chris, thanks for coming back on the show to talk about buying on your terms. I love the creative strategies that you shared with us today. And I think it kind of opens up the mind to getting real estate investing done, a different way than what is traditionally thought of. So thank you so much for having this conversation with us today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Brian. Hopefully we dropped a nugget or two they can grab.
I want to thank everybody for listening to this episode. I'm your host, Brian Hamrick from Hamrick Investment Group, and you can find out more about me by going to higinvestor.com. That's HIGinvestor.com. And you can also ask questions and join us on Facebook by going to RPOA, Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast. And remember to save the date for the Midwest Real Estate Investor Conference on April 24th and 25th of 2025 in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It's going to be an event you won't want to miss, packed with invaluable sessions and opportunities to connect with like-minded investors. Keep listening for more updates, and we look forward to seeing you there. This episode was sponsored by Green Property Management, managing everything from single-family homes to apartment complexes in the West Michigan area. Find out more at greenpropertymgt.com. And RCB and Associates, helping real estate investors and small business owners navigate the complex world of health insurance and Medicare benefits at rcbassociatesllc.com.
You've been listening to the Rental Property Owner and Real Estate Investor Podcast, brought to you by the Rental Property Owner Association. You can find out more at rpoaonline.org. If you enjoyed this podcast, please go to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and review.